Columbo was an episodic procedural show about a detective solving crimes that ran from 1968 to 1978, with episodes that filled a 2-hour time slot. What sets it apart from other detective procedurals of its time and now is that the audience knows everything about the crime before the titular Detective Columbo does. This dramatic irony is used masterfully to create a layer of tension that keeps the audience engaged for the hour and a half to 2 hours of its runtime. It also allows the audience to see how smart Columbo is, as he can figure everything out without having seen it all happen as we have. Often he also uses his unassuming appearance to play mind games with the villain of the week, as it were, and get to the bottom of the crime without them realizing it, which is also very fun to watch. This is a show where the hero and villain are working together show where the hero and villain are working side by side for most of it, trying to play each other all the while. All an inherently engaging dynamic, I think, as long as the writing holds up, which it does. Class often plays a role in the cat and mouse play. Class often plays a role in the cat and mouse interplay as well. Most of the crimes I watched being committed in this show were by and against the high class, and Columbo being more middle class adds to his ability to make people underestimate him. He does his best to lull the killers into false senses of security, poking and prodding them in just the right ways to get him the evidence he needs without tipping them off that he knows, or at least not too much. All this and more go into creating the appeal for and impact of the show. Because the only consistent character throughout the show really is Columbo, he never goes through character arcs, and he sometimes doesn't even show up until 30 minutes in. His being an appealing character to watch and forming a parasocial relationship with the audience is very important to the show's success. He's the everyman, appearing out of place in the worlds of his cases, but by the end proving he's more powerful than the rich people he's up against, not through his money, but through his smarts, and justice is served. It's a very compelling story for the wide majority of Americans, myself included. I'm also just partial to a good New Yorker accent. Making the audience wait to see him probably adds to the appeal rather than take it away as well. While the viewer is getting wrapped up in the story of these new characters, there's a layer of anticipation formed for when we get to see Columbo show up. And when he does, it's released as excitement and creates momentum to carry us through the last 2/3 of the episode. So the structure and characterization of Columbo create the conditions for a strong parasocial relationship with the audience, and that parasocial relationship also plays into the cultural impact of the show. I haven't read research articles or studies about the impact of Columbo on culture, but I can see some of the effects it could have on audiences, including reducing the idolization of the upper class and getting people more into detective work. I can even see the show being the setup for a pipeline into people getting interested into true crime, especially those stories where the emphasis is on the detectives figuring out who committed the crimes and then catching them. One final point I believe has contributed to the show's wide appeal is just the sheer craft being very good. The episodes I watched had very good cinematography, production design, writing, performances, and scoring that enhanced the scenes. Paired with the runtime, each episode really feels like its own film, which gives it its own special appeal, especially for the time, I'd imagine. Movie like TV shows are a lot more dime a dozen nowadays. Honestly, I can see Columbo fitting in better on streaming now than on cable back then, but I can also imagine a time when Columbo was a show you planned your schedule around to see because of this. So I'm sure it had an impact on those masses watching it all at the same time. Whether it was what I talked about earlier or just in the conversations we're having. If I watched this as a kid, I imagine I would have been a lot more into detective and mystery stories, both watching and writing. To get more specific before wrapping this up, the impact this show had on me while watching consecutive episodes of the first season had a lot to do with the craft of the writing, which makes sense since I plan on that being my emphasis, so I pay attention to it more than other things. I watched episodes on Tubi, which seems to contradict other online sources about which episodes are which. On Canvas and IMDb, the episode you had us watch, Murder by the Book, is marked as Season 1, Episode 1, but on Tubi, Prescription Murder is marked as Season 1, Episode 1, Ransom for a Dead Man is episode 2, and Murder by the Book is episode 3. So just so you know, for the video, I refer to episodes as Tubi does. So when I say 1, I mean Prescription Murder, 2, Ransom for a Dead Man, and 3, Murder by the Book. The first episode kept me engaged with multiple little plot twists that upped the ante, from Ray's wife initially not being dead, to her dying before she could confess, to some random guy confessing. The plot kept me on my toes as much as it did Ray. It also struck me as kind of funny that the episode lays out through Ray the things about Columbo's character that make him interesting that I talked about in the beginning, about an hour and 10 minutes in. They it makes sense because his character is a psychiatrist, but it kind of feels like the show is explaining itself to its new audience. And then right after, Columbo and Ray get into a hypothetical about the case, which is barely a veil over the truth, but in a very fun way. The show is showing its cards and explaining itself a little bit more plainly than it tends to in the future. This lets the audience in, I think, and was a good idea for its appeal. One last note on this episode that leans more into opinion than analysis, but I just really wanted to mention the shot at 1 hour, 18 minutes, and 45 seconds is beautiful. They use a mirror to have Columbo and Miss Hudson in the same shot. It's so unnecessary, but beautiful. And it just sort of proves to me that the care that was put into the presentation for the show was great, and at least for me, makes it much more appealing and thereby impactful. Episode 2 surprised me quite a bit. After watching the first episode and the third one for class, I thought I had noticed the beginnings of a pattern of male killers and violence against women that placed them lower than men in the narrative and the meta narrative. Though the reveal at the end of episode 1 that neither woman actually died already had me second guessing that conclusion. And then episode 2 rocked up with a badass lawyer woman killer who flies planes with a black woman and a man as his assistants. From the get go, I then realized that the show wasn't just a reflection of a misogynistic society, but was actually pushing against it sometimes and actively putting men and women in different roles in different episodes. This is even emphasized by Columbo commenting about Leslie flying planes. And she's the villain, but she's the lady killer. She and perhaps the audience think it's because he surprised a woman could or would do that, but really it's revealed because he hates flying and is impressed by anybody who can do it. It also encourages everyone to view women as a little bit more equal and for that kind of thinking to be normal. Also, another randomly beautiful shot mentioned for episode 2, the way the car lights cross-faded onto Leslie's eyes at 5 minutes, 8 seconds was just lovely. I also appreciated that Leslie wasn't put into the femme fatale trope. I think it's overused at this point, especially, and often two-dimensionalizes characters. Leslie has a lot of different faces she wears throughout the episode, which really shows off her actress's chops. But none of them are trying to seduce anyone, really, and it engages the audience, pushes the story forward, and gives her more power than any femme fatale characterization would have. And Margaret being a key player was cool to see too. So you get like badass woman villain, and you also get a woman hero character. I think having both is even better than just having one. These choices certainly had an impact on me as a viewer, made me respect and enjoy the show more than I already did. But I also think it would have impacted culture in a subtle way of furthering feminism in media and allowing women to see themselves in these detective stories and as more than just side characters all the time. In episode 3, which was the first I watched because of class, a lot of the same strengths came up. There weren't plot twists like the first or the scandal of a woman killer like the second, but a lot of moving pieces and characters that made up for the tension and momentum. The killer character in 3 felt very similar to Ray from the first episode in terms of archetype. He's an uppity man who feels entitled to the things he wants and confident that he'll get them because of who he is. He's much less aware of what Columbo is doing, though, and is sloppier, and that changes the dynamic a bit. Enough to justify this episode's separate existence from the first. But having such a similar villain character in quick succession suggests to me that this was one, a dynamic the writers had fun with, which I also had fun with as a viewer, so fair. And two, was a type of character they specifically wanted to highlight as someone for the public to look out for. It felt to me like the writers were saying just because a man is wealthy and suave does not make him a good person. In fact, he's probably not. I think that idea is a much more broadly held belief today, and while it's definitely not solely from this show, it and other media with similar messaging all contributed toward that cultural change, I think. And because I've set it up now, episode three's standout shot to me, or at least one that I found that looked cool, was at 24 minutes 36 seconds. Villain guy and his wife are in the foreground and Columbo's in the background. You can just like see him puzzling about this whole conversation and situation, and the lighting's very stark. It looks very nice and it does its job well. An honorable mention as far as the feminism angle goes. I think it's interesting that they had like an ugly woman character who's annoying, and that the main guy is just like using the whole time. And they do sort of play that up for jokes and laughs a bit, but she does also have her own dignity as a character and is sort of allowed to be more than just like an ugly woman. And so I think like is both a I certainly wouldn't say it's a step back. It isn't like a huge step forward, but it's not a step back, and I appreciate it nonetheless. All in all, to wrap things up, Columbo is a good show. Though for this video, it's more important that this show has an impact, which is in large part due to its quality. It ran for 10 years and 10 seasons, full of tightly written investigations of intriguing and tough cases with many interesting characters through which the writers said different things, all tied together with the charismatic detective Lieutenant Columbo. The show makes you feel smart while watching it, or at least it did me. You're in on the joke, as it were, and you can practically see what the characters are thinking on their faces, and it's all very satisfying. That appeal kept it going for a long time and made it affect many people, so there's no doubt in my mind that there was some kind of cultural effect produced by the show, and I think it was largely a good one. My only knock against it really is that it could be perceived as propaganda, or at least a precursor. Um, and it sort of glorifies this whole process of detecting and investigating with the cat and mouse play is very it's not realistic to real life, but it's very fun and entertaining. And I think it's okay that it's not realistic to real life and that's just fun and entertaining. Um, but just something to mention in all fairness. Anyways, thanks for the class and all the second chances. I look forward to taking fundamentals with you next semester. Hopefully, I do better than I did the first time.